Cowardice asks, the question, is it safe? Expediency asks, the question, is it politic? Vanity asks, the question, is it popular? But conscience asks, the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard.
Fighting for humanity and against globalism, one mind at a time. It's the Freedom Link with Joe Joseph.
Welcome again, everybody, to another exciting. This is the first one of 2023, Scotty. The first
Yes,
broadcast.
it is.
Yes, it is. So, welcome everybody to this. This is one of those. I'm not a big resolution dude. Never have been. Never will be. I don't believe in them. It's just one of those things that you just do it if you have to do it. I don't think you need a new year or a holiday to celebrate anything like that or to start something like that or whatever. You just do it if you have to do it. So anyway, I did something that I had to do, and it was all after. Let me start off by saying this: the whole premise of this broadcast tonight is, what do you do when you're in pain and you can't get help? That's the question that I'm asking. And I normally say, what do you do when you need help and you can't get it? But it's kind of overly broad. I like the pain thing, and the reason why is because pain, everybody knows pain. It is a base level type of thing. Pain is a necessary part of life. A lot of people don't realize that, but it is. If I go and I touch a hot burner on a stove, ow, right? Pain. It's a response. It protects me. So there's times when you need pain. There's other times when you don't need it, especially when you're trying to be productive, especially when you're trying to be a mother or a provider or any sort of pursuit that you might be in. If you're in some sort of physical, mental, spiritual, chronic pain, it is a detriment, let's just say, or a huge barrier to you being able to be who you want to be or to do what you want to do or aspire to. And there's a myriad of reasons why that happens. And everybody's as unique as the fingerprint on your hand. But at no time should anyone ever be discriminated against or denied care or treatment because they're suffering, because they hurt, or because the treatment for that is something of a social stigma, let's say. And as PJ Carson here just put in the chat, says the UN says no opioids after 2035. People are doing surgeries without painkillers and going home. It's nuts. I have a story to tell about that, believe it or not. And thanks for the comment, PJ, because it's so true. Millions of people suffer, and the numbers are staggering, but death by suicide is skyrocketing. They say veterans, and absolutely so. Yeah, sure, let's get the bottom half of my body blown off. And, oh, by the way, take a Tylenol. That ain't going to work, right? I hate to say it. It's pie in the sky thinking if you think anything else. So I filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice the last week of December after a visit that my wife and I had to go down to her doctor. She has to go, and we have to drive about 500 miles, Scotty, every 3 months to go see this neurologist. The only one. Now, she's been going to this guy for 15 years. And even though we've left the area now for 7 years, we still have to drive down to see that doctor because of just how bad this is. In New England, she can't get help. We've been to doctors, even asked to, pain management, sports medicine, orthopedics, you name it, doesn't matter. They won't see her. They won't take her on. Why? Too much of a liability. Why? The DEA. It always comes back to the DEA. That's something that we'll get into later. But the government is and has a very, very evil history of doing things in the name of the common good that aren't good at all. And they've killed a lot of people. This experience that we've had since my wife was injured during the birth of our youngest daughter has been nothing short of like 10,000 doctorate degrees in how to be discriminated against. And it's given me a lot of insight into how people have been brutalized by the government. All for what? They say it's to battle addiction, but it has nothing to do with that. As you'll come to find out, all of this is a continuation of programs that have continued from the 19th century on to today, but in different names, shapes, and forms. This latest being the war on drugs, or the war on pain or people. So people are forced to live in pain and agony. I have witnessed people, prisoners of war, as a vet, that have been treated with much more dignity and respect than my wife has ever been treated with by the doctors. And let me say this, the doctors really are, they're victimized too, because gosh darn it, man. I mean, all it takes is one mess up by somebody and their practice is shut down. Everything's frozen. Can't practice medicine again. Pharmacies.
They have to operate under a culture of fear.
Yeah, constantly. And it's arbitrary. Here's the other thing too, folks. All this stuff is arbitrary. There's no law. Nobody's breaking the law here. This is just a racket. Smedley Butler said it best. If you don't know who Smedley Butler is, most decorated Marine in the nation, in our history. 2 medals of honor. But more importantly, post-World War I, he led the bonus army on Washington, D.C., the one that was ultimately burned to the ground by Douglas MacArthur. And then afterwards, the very same people that embarked upon this kind of policy, the I know what's best for you crowd, the ones that don't know that the doctor-patient relationship is sacred, the ones that say Well, we're doing this for your own good, you see. We're doing this for the safety, the peace and safety of everybody. See, that's what it's all about, right? No. It's about control and institutionalization. And that's what's happened. See, so now people are institutionalized. You're treated like you're treated worse than a prisoner. That's what's just so I don't get it, you know. And so we have to the poor woman has to go down to Virginia, go see a doctor every 3 months. Now, mind you, very, very painful process to go down and back up. I can't see that. So, and then there's a logistical problem, right? Because then you have prescriptions. Well, how do you do that? Well, you got to go down, you got to pick them up, they got to be there. So we go in to fill the prescriptions, and the owner of this pharmacy just had a baby. Now, mind you, starting a new family. Think about that. And the pharmacy wouldn't fill her prescriptions. Well, why wouldn't they fill her prescriptions? I'll tell you why. See, you don't understand, but you have too many controlled prescriptions. We can't fill those unless you fill your primary care physician. By the way, there are two of them. Two. You have to fill your primary care prescriptions down here too in our pharmacy. Well, dude, I'm in Massachusetts. Our PCP's up there. I'm not going to fill them for Massachusetts. You can't cross that many borders. I don't think. I mean, so now wait. So what you're saying is, so I have to go change my doctor from where I live to go to be by the specialist that my wife has to see, and she has to see, so you want us to get PCPs, and then even though we don't get anything else, because I don't have any ailments, I don't take anything, she's the one with the life-altering injury that can't be fixed, right? So you're telling me you want me to go there, get prescriptions I don't need to fill there so I can fill my or her prescriptions, the two that are controlled, there with you? Well, yeah, because the ratio. We need the ratio to show that you're getting what? It's like you're mad, man. This is crazy. Well, there's just too much risk. They're breathing down our necks, And so you go and you look at this stuff, right? The DEA has been on record as calling people like my wife and all the sufferers out there as collateral damage. You're collateral damage of the drug war. But see, what's happening is it's a war crime that's being perpetrated on everyone. And because you don't know, because we've learned to accept this as it's okay. Oh, it's for the common good, Scotty. It's for the good of the people. Meanwhile, you've got China shipping things through an open border that if you just get a whiff of it, you're dead. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
The Americans with Disabilities Act is supposed to protect us against this type of discrimination. All of you out there that suffer like that. You cannot and should not ever be discriminated because of the type of injury you have or the way that you have to treat it. That has no bearing on anything. And see, that's the problem. Because this is nothing but a continuation of a eugenics program that started in the 19th century and has gone by many names and many forms. And we're going to dive into that tonight with some examples of how the government, in the name of the common good, sacrifices thousands upon thousands of people and have no problem with it. Now, for the record, Scotty here is a chronic pain sufferer and somebody that suffers this kind of stuff. And I would say, Scotty, that this is probably a lot more prevalent than is talked about or given attention to. And a lot of people suffer in silence and or are helpless. That's the other thing I've come to find out. There's no way to get relief. They're killing all the options. The only option you got is to go to the street. But if you go to the street, well, now that's a crime. If you don't die, right? If you don't overdose, if you don't have a problem, now you go to the street. Well, now you got the criminal element. So now we got the fines and the courts and the things and the stuff. Oh, and wait, there's the lawyer lobby too. You got to have those guys. Now those guys are going to be represented. Meanwhile, you've got 5,500 DEA agents that have to justify their existence every year. See, they have to go for appropriations and they have to justify themselves. Do you think they're going to justify themselves going after cartels? Oh, no. They're going to go after the people in wheelchairs. They're going to go people with a bank account. And a paper trail. Oh, and they're doctors too. You know, it's freaking terrible.
Right, and I'll give a little perspective from my situation, right? So, I've been in a wheelchair my whole life. I was born with a rare joint condition called AMC, arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. That's a mouthful, but it's a rare condition, and it affects all my joints. I have extremely limited mobility. I pretty much have to rely on my mom to be my caregiver and cook my food and do pretty much do almost everything. And along with my condition is an extreme form of arthritis. When I was in middle school, they said I had the arthritis of an 80-year-old, so that gives you an idea of, the kind of issues I deal with. And so, here just recently, I had to go and get a bunch of x-rays on my back, and because my back has been just killing me, Yeah. And, when you're sitting in a chair your whole life, it's not very good on your back. And, I've got curvature of the spine and all kinds of stuff going on. And, there's been many, many times when they've been like, well, do you want some pain meds? And I have chosen not to go that route, because once you start going down that route, it's going to end up causing there's going to be problems, and it's just what you're talking about.
Yep.
Right, because once I get on those, right, and I start depending on those for relief, what happens when the rug gets pulled out? What happens?
And it does.
Yes, exactly.
It does. Yeah.
And
anybody out there, just to put that, I just want that to be, I want that to just soak in, because I think there's more people that understand that how that feels than is given credit for.
Right.
That getting the rug pulled out from under you. And when you're on that kind of treatment, where you're not psychologically addicted, you're physically. Let's just get that straight too. It's physically dependent. You're not addicted to it. You're physically dependent. It's just one of the side effects. It's no different than anything else. There has to be a step down process, and if there isn't, it's really terrible. It's terrible.
And
that doesn't make it bad. It's just a side effect.
Right. And not only is it a physical addiction, but if it's what you rely on to just function, it's not really an addiction. It's this is what I need to actually to actually, function like a normal person, and to not be in pain. And whenever you're not able to do that, whenever that rug is pulled out from underneath you, what do you do? And that's why you see this massive increase in depression and suicide and all of this stuff, because a lot of people have had the rug pulled out from underneath them, and they have no other option than to, like you said, either go and get it off the street, and then once you're doing that, you're playing roulette, because you don't know what you're getting. Are you going to get something that is laced with something from China, and that'll be your last that'll be the last thing you ever see. So it's really terrible, the state that we're in. And
yeah, very inhumane, extremely inhumane. I mean, unbelievably inhumane. And for all of those out there, especially those that are my age and even older, where you're talking about retiring, all that wear and tear. Look, that happens. There comes a point in time where you wear things out. Physical therapy doesn't do it. You don't restore joints and things like that. That doesn't work that way,
Right.
So there has to be a serious look at this. But I want to get into the history, because this is huge, Scotty. This is very important.
And well, hold on, before you dive into that, I also got to say, and then not only that, you have alternative options that get shut down, right?
Shut down.
You have
right.
you have the war on cannabis that is still raging in some states.
Yeah.
That provides at least
How many
some kind of alternative.
That's right.
And you can't even do that,
dude.
So
100 years ago, there were opium dens. If you wanted to go do that, if you were you'd go down and get some opium, right? Okay. When they shut those down, what do people do? What happens when prohibition happens? People find a workaround.
Mm-hmm.
The workaround's never as pure and as good and as safe as the original, because it's a workaround. And each time it gets worse and worse and worse. And now where are we? Now you get a grain of sand. This fentanyl, the thing is a grain of sand, and it'll kill you.
Right.
It's made for elephants.
They're
and horses,
people,
but yeah,
they're forcing people to play roulette
to the streets.
Right.
That's right. They're forcing people to the streets, and then they create a criminal element, and that feeds the private prison industrial complex and the lawyer lobby and blah blah blah. Look, all these are herbs that we were built with receptors for, right? We have two types of receptors: opioid receptors and cannabinoid receptors. Holy crap! That's crazy. We were built with that. It was like, here's God. Here's the stuff you use. And oh, by the way, here's the mechanism. Whee! There it is. It's all there. So that's the problem. You've got the science. It works. There's side effects. Antidepressants, people that are on those. Guess what? What do you get? Side effects. What happens when you try to get off of those? Wow. Withdrawals like you've never seen. I mean, it's like an out-of-body experience. Been there, done that. I'm telling you, they're legal. You can go get those. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't get addicted to those. Baloney, you don't get addicted to those. Benzo withdrawal, same thing. It doesn't matter. There's all sorts of stuff, but the stigma is there. The stigma's there. So let's go back to prohibition. And the important thing to understand here is, in the 19th century, there was a push for the eradication of the of the disabled and those that were a burden to society.
The undesirables of society, right?
Thank you very much. That's what it was really all about. And I'm going to share my screen, and I want to show everybody just exactly some of the paraphernalia that existed at the time of this and the creation of eugenics. And it's very, very raw because they didn't know, it's like looking back at slavery today. Back then, more people accepted it. Today, it's atrocious. So, eugenics. This is Aaron Melissa Dykes, True Stream Media. This 1926 eugenics exhibit sums up what the elite think about you and your family. And that hasn't changed, by the way. So here's eugenics. Here's it is right here. See this this tree. Eugenics is the self-direction of human evolution. And if you notice, look at the roots. And the roots have all of the things: control of medicine, surgery, psychiatry, sociology, religion, education, genealogy, biography, statistics. Look at it. All of it. Mental testing. All of it. It says, like a tree, eugenics draws its materials from many sources and organizes them into a harmonious entity. So then you go down to like this board. And this board, look at, some people are born to be a burden on the rest. It says, this light flashes every 15 seconds. Every 15 seconds, 100, it looks like $100 or 100 pounds of your money goes for the care of persons with bad heredity, such as the insane, the feeble-minded, criminals, and other defectives. It says, learn about your heredity, and you can help to correct these conditions. And then it goes down, and you've got more. The light flashes every 48 seconds. A person is born in the United States who will never grow up mentally beyond the stage of a normal 8-year-old boy or girl. It says this light flashes every 50 seconds. A person is committed to jail in the United States. Very few normal persons ever go to jail. That's right. And if you didn't hear that, so what Ange was saying was, and they don't even, they will and treat animals with more dignity than they do human beings. Let's be real, right? They will not euthanize a human that's suffering with no end in sight and no solution. But they'll do it for a dog. They'll do it for a cat. They'll do it for a squirrel. A wild animal. That's right. Just think about that for a second and how cruel that is. And huzzah to Canada for starting the ability to have a dignity or a dignified death. It says this light flashes every 16 seconds. A person is born in the United States. And this light flashes every 7.5 minutes. It says a high-grade person is born in the United States, will have the ability to do creative work and be fit for leadership. About 4% of all Americans come within this class. Isn't that interesting, Scotty? And that was huge. Now, what you have to understand in this is the same group. Okay, so we're talking about the Rockefeller Foundation, the Guggenheim Foundation, the Carnegie Institute, the Ford Foundation, the endowments. Those will come to be the central control point at the turn of the 20th century and into the 20th century.
Makes you wonder, It makes you wonder if you were to whittle down the population down to 4%. I wonder if it would. I wonder if it would reach that 500 million uh, number that was on the Georgia Guidestones.
I don't know. I don't know. This next one, unfit human traits. This was a pamphlet they sent out, such as feeble-mindedness, epilepsy, criminality, insane, alcoholism, pauperism, if you're poor, and many others. Run in families and are inherited in exactly the same way as color in guinea pigs. If all marriages were eugenic, we could breed out most of this unfitness in 3 generations. And see the triangle of life right here? Oh, yeah, that's the answer, guys. Yeah, that's right. You can improve your education and even change your environments, but what you really are was all settled when your parents were born. Selected parents will have better children. This is the great aim of eugenics. This, of course, is also the same time that Aldous Huxley writes Brave New World. And at the same time that you also have a very staunch push for socialism and communism. And guys like Winston Churchill were very vocal about who the control freaks were and where they were located. And there were 2 places, London and New York City. So you have New York City where, like I said before, the endowments met. And I brought up Smedley Butler earlier. So around this time, Smedley Butler's pissed, right? And he pens the book War is a Racket. Sound familiar to everybody in pain? Because so is the whole war on pain. It's a racket. And everything that he went up against is kind of eerily similar to the type of war that I see being waged on people in pain. So Smedley Butler gets approached by these very people, these endowments, the well-to-do, the money trust, as they were called. And they say, we need you to be the fascist dictator that this country needs because Roosevelt is driving this into the ground. We can't have this guy. He is going to be a socialist like there's no other. We can't have that. So Butler goes along with it for a certain amount of time. But the long short of it is he blows the whistle to Congress. And he tells them exactly who's involved. And they were just blown away. Now, mind you, these are the eugenicists. You can still go to their museum on Long Island. They have a eugenics museum. And you can see all this stuff. And it's called the Eugenics Record Office, Cold Spring Harbor on Long Island. They have all sorts of interesting records about this kind of stuff, Scotty. And the reason why I bring this up is because there was a big backlash to this in the 1930s, around the same time that they approached Butler. Now, Butler, of course, blows the whistle. The McCormick-Dickstein Committee is formed, and they look into this, and they're like, whoa, dude, this is bad. This is really bad. This is like beyond bad. This is like, we can't talk about it. What? Long short of it is, they wanted to get Butler in there. They thought he was pissed because he was pushed aside as the commandant of the Marine Corps. And then all of his bonus army was basically brutalized. And the shanty towns that they lived in Washington, D.C. burned. And they did not get the help that they desperately needed during the Depression. Meanwhile, he's working with Congress. Congress gets this story. They're like, I can't get over it. So they sweep it under the rug. Bad move. Very bad move. So what does that mean? Well, this is about the same time that a certain Nazi comes to power over in
Yep.
Germany.
Just about to say.
And so just because of the backlash and everything else, they need a change of scenery to do it. So how do they do it? Well, one of the families in this endowment umbrella was the Warburgs. The Warburgs, of course, were on Jekyll Island and the creation of the Federal Reserve. So Warburg goes over to Germany and takes over as the chairman of IG Farben. IG Farben, for those that don't know, is today's Bayer Corporation. But back then, they were a brand new and pretty doggone big pharmaceutical company headquartered in Germany. So IG Farben was also pivotal in coming up with ways to exterminate people. They ran extensive experiments on eugenics, on genetics. They tried to sew people together. They did all sorts of sadistic crap. Thalidomide. Yep. All that kind of stuff. They ran the gambit, right? And they learned a lot. They learned a lot. So remember that. Now, to give you an example of how I know this, there were some people that got caught up in all this that got exposed and had their assets seized. One of the major ones that did that was Prescott Bush. Now, Prescott Bush was a Nazi sympathizer and had his assets seized under the Trading with the Enemies Act. But also, he was part of this whole operation, which, when you're part of the big club, and we're not, you get to know these things and you get to participate and, you know, you're doing your evil stuff. So he has his assets seized. Well, now they got a PR problem because not only is he a senator, but he's also the founder of the USO. So how do we put this guy in jail? How do we parade him out there like this after everything he's done? You got Bob Hope, Prescott Bush, sweep it under the rug. Okay. So now things kind of progress. But while all this is going on, there are certain things that we're taken advantage of. So from the period of the 1920s up to the end of World War II, Scotty, you had a couple of different things going on. So you've had this eugenics thing. You've got science working on genetics. You've got the experimentation going here and then moving to Nazi Germany, where they can kind of do it unfettered.
Oh, and
almost like a modern day China, if you think about it.
Right, and let's not forget to mention that during all this as well, Planned Parenthood was established. So
that's right, Miss Sanger. Yeah, that's right. So 1926, or in and about during Prohibition, Slate wrote a fantastic piece about 12 years ago. And I know this because when it came out, I was doing this very broadcast. And I was like, man, what a great overview on this. But in the name of the common good, the U.S. government poisoned alcohol during Prohibition.
Right, they were poisoning all of the precursors or ingredients.
That's right.
I think they were spiking it with methanol or something like that.
Methanol. Yep.
So
it was. I want to read this story because I think this is very fitting, and this should be a good example. This goes on more often than you think, and it's going on right now. This very thing that I'm talking about right now is happening in this country to anybody that suffers with pain. And I mean it because it is egregious. But what is happening here is exactly what's happening now. It's not alcohol this time. Now it's a different form. Just like everything migrates to something else, this is where we're at. Now listen to this. It was Christmas Eve, 1926. The streets aglitter with snow and lights when the man afraid of Santa Claus stumbled into the emergency room at New York City's Bellevue Hospital. He was gasping with fear. Santa Claus, he kept telling the nurses, was just behind him wielding a baseball bat. Now, before the hospital staff realized how sick he was, the alcohol-induced hallucination was just a symptom. The man died. And so did another holiday party goer. And another. And as dusk fell on Christmas, the hospital staff tallied up more than 60 people made desperately ill by alcohol and 8 dead from it. Within the next 2 days, yet another 23 people died in the city from celebrating the season. Doctors were accustomed to alcohol poisoning by then, the routine of life in the Prohibition era. The bootlegged whiskeys and so-called gin often made people sick. The liquor produced in hidden stills frequently came tainted with metals and other impurities. But this outbreak was bizarrely different. The deaths, as investigators would shortly realize, came courtesy of the U.S. government. Frustrated that people continued to consume so much alcohol even after it was banned, federal officials had decided to try to use a different kind of enforcement. They ordered the poisoning of the industrial alcohols manufactured in the United States, products regularly stolen by bootleggers and resold as drinkable spirits. The idea was to scare people into giving up illicit drinking. Instead, by the time the Prohibition era ended in 1933, the federal poisoning program, by some estimates, killed at least 10,000 Americans. Although mostly forgotten today, the chemists' war on prohibition remains one of the strangest and most deadly decisions in American law enforcement history. As one of its most outspoken opponents, Charles Norris, the chief medical examiner of New York City during the 1920s, liked to say it was, quote, our national experiment in extermination. Poisonous alcohol still kills. 16 people died just this month after drinking lethal booze in Indonesia, where some bootleggers make their own brews to avoid steep taxes. But that's due to unscrupulous businessmen. That's not the government. And that's not by order.
Let's put that in perspective. The federal poisoning program killed 3 times as more people than 9/11.
Yeah. That's just, how crazy is that?
Right.
You know? Think about that.
It's wild, man.
Yeah. Now, when Ange goes to her doctor, right, she has to sign over her rights. She has to sign away her Fourth Amendment right. Because as a condition just to be seen. Because she has to be, drug tested, and she has to have her pills counted, and she has to have all that stuff done, and she's treated like a criminal. I mean, it's great. What the hell did I serve 6 years for? Freedom and democracy? What the freaking heck is that? But I digress. Go ahead before I continue. What do you got?
Well, and like I said, this is why I've chosen not to go that route, even though I would love to.
Of course, to have relief,
and have, but to go through what Ange is going through, it's not worth it, man. In my opinion, I don't know how I'd be able to handle that, you know.
Yeah, you you have to be able to take a severe hit to your dignity.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be able to have the rug pulled out from underneath me or anything like that. You know, it's just
it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So let me continue here. Yeah. It says, I learned of the federal poisoning program while researching my new book, The Poisoner's Handbook, which is set in Jazz Age, New York. My first reaction was that I must have gotten it wrong. I never heard that the government poisoned people during Prohibition. Oh, yeah. That's not the only time, by the way. We'll get into that in a few. So it says, I did, however, remember the U.S. government's controversial decision in the 1970s to spray Mexican marijuana with paraquat, a herbicide, and its use was primarily intended to destroy crops. But government officials insisted that awareness of the toxin would deter marijuana smokers. They echoed the official position of the 1920s that if some citizens end up poisoned, well, they brought it on themselves, you see. Now, although paraquat wasn't really all that toxic, the outcry forced the government to drop the plan. Still, the incident created an unsurprising lack of trust in the government's motives, which revealed
Right.
itself in the occasional rumors circulated today through federal agencies such as the CIA mix poison into the illegal drug supply, which
You know,
is
Joe.
what you see now. Now, do you not see a parallel, Scotty, between that and how people are buying? Let's just say they go to the street and they get some Coke and they do that. Oh, it's laced with fentanyl. Oh, you're dead. And it's
Right.
happening more and more and more where all of these street drugs are being laced with fentanyl. This is not the first time this has happened.
Right. And I was just about
Go
to
ahead, Scott.
bring that up. And it makes you wonder, is this really coming from China?
Yes.
I'm just gonna throw that out there.
But
Okay,
even if it is, even if
it is, it's being allowed to happen. You know,
there you
it's
go,
almost
turn
like
the other cheek.
a blind
the other
eye
cheek.
is being turned, and
Yep.
well, this is just, this is kind of working out for our agenda.
Turn the other cheek. That's right.
Let
Hey,
the
look
let
at what's
the
going on. I
let the
want you
quote
to look at the
unquote
stark parallels
right
between Nazi Germany and China. Look at what they're
exactly.
doing.
And it's almost like, hey, let the undesirables, let the quote unquote trash take itself out, if you will,
Exactly.
in their
Thank
mind.
you. That was exactly. Yeah, because that's exactly what they're doing. Hey, we'll just make it to the point where they can't take it anymore. And then they
Right.
just take themselves out, right? Okay. So it says, during Prohibition, however, an official sense of higher purpose kept the poisoning program in place. Remember that. Higher purpose, common good. Those are some very, very key phrases that when you're a student of history, they're like you just see them all the time. They flash, flash, flash. And those phrases are pivotal positioning statements that are used throughout all of these different agendas. You know, kind of like the one that I'm trying to get people to understand. The doctor patient relationship is sacred. 6 words. That's it. And the reason why it's not okay for the government to be involved in your medical care. If you're being discriminated against, the government is supposed to protect you and protect your rights. They're not supposed to take them away. They're not supposed to terrorize and strong arm doctors and patients. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to protect your rights. They're supposed to ensure that you get treated properly. That's the way it's supposed to work, but that's not what happens. And as a Chicago Tribune editorial in 1927 said, normally, no American government would engage in such business. It is only in the curious fanaticism of prohibition that any means, however barbarous, are considered justified. Others, however, accuse lawmakers opposed to the poisoning plan of being in cahoots with criminals and argued that bootleggers and their law-breaking alcoholic customers deserve no sympathy. Must Uncle Sam guarantee safety for first? I don't know. I would think that the government has no taking any citizen's life in that regard. It's just unfathomable to me. But it happens, and it's replete through our history. I mean, I can't get I can't get over it. It's nuts, dude.
And it's a similar situation to uh the 1980s, and flooding major cities with crack cocaine, right?
Same thing. And that
Right.
there you go.
And that was to get the African American community addicted and cause
Gary
havoc.
Webb,
Yeah.
And Gary Webb of the Sacramento Bee goes and tries to report it. And they find him suicided. And I say that because they say he committed suicide, but there's no way you can,
Right, and all you gotta do
shoot
is
yourself
listen
in the head twice.
to the accounts of Highway Rick Ross, right? Talking
Highway
about
Rick
how,
Ross.
Yeah,
Yep.
it.
But I mean, seriously, think about this. Think about that. Another great example. Another great example of how the war on drugs was used to target a certain sector of the population and discriminate
Right.
against a people that knew what and suffered through some pretty horrific shit. And then you throw that on top of it. I mean, you can't make this shit up. I hate to say it like that, but you just can't. So that's why I'm a little freaking ticked off, because when that happened to my wife, it's like, oh my God, now all of a sudden I've got a frame of reference. Holy shit, are you kidding me? You're doing what? For where? How? What? I was just, no. So now her doctor is the only pain management doctor in the state of Virginia. They've shut everybody else down. And even Eastern Virginia Medical School, it's a university hospital and medical school, won't touch them, won't use them. You better be inpatient. Oh, but if you are, we'll put you on a Dilaudid drip for about 24 hours after you get your chest ripped open. But after that, 5 milligram perks for you, baby. That should help you right out. And then when the pain spikes and you undo all that surgery that you just did, well, that's your fault. You didn't control yourself. You should meditate more. I mean, it's just nuts.
Right, like
have you found your inner peace, Scotty? Have you found your inner peace? Have you found your center?
A few years ago, when I had my my right leg amputated under the knee, below the knee. I'm a double amputee. I've had both my legs amputated at this point, just due to circulation issues. Being in a wheelchair my whole life and all that stuff. It wreaks havoc on you. There are so many different collateral medical issues that come with with everything. It's crazy, but it was a joke what they prescribed me, after having a limb amputated, and no refill,
used to be you could go down to the drugstore and get some freaking laudanum, hey, right? You could buy it in the drugstore. Oh, you can't do that anymore. I mean, it's because, and then what happens? The workarounds. And again,
right.
The workarounds are never better, and it creates a criminal element. But that criminal element's there for a reason, because it has to feed the beast. It has to feed the beast. That beast is the many lobbies that your police unions, your lawyer lobbies, all of these government agencies, they all prey on the helpless.
And the common sense workarounds that actually are safe.
Yep. No, can't have those.
No, can't have those.
Can't have those.
Right.
They recently just came out. It had to do with buprenorphine, right? And the DEA came out and they said, well, you got to temper that. That's being abused. You can't do that. Right now, for anybody that doesn't know, that's the medicine they give you to come off the stuff. And when you take more of it, it actually has the reverse effect. So it doesn't, you can't really abuse it. And the DEA saying like, no, you gotta temper that. People are like looking for help. Here's something that can help people, the ones that actually need help, and we're telling them no. You have to suffer. You have to continue, and all that. It's just nuts. Everything they do is counterproductive to what they actually say. They speak out of both sides of their mouth. So that's why
it's because they don't want people to get better. They don't want that.
That's right. There's no money in cures by cracking.
No.
There's no money in that. So in hour number 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about that history. What else has the government done to experiment and to kill its own people? And are we just witnessing the next step in that progression? That, my friends, is what we're going to check out. And please, 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 kgradb.com. Go there today, check it out, and become a member. We'll be right back. Hour number 2 coming right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small esoteric getaways are limited and do feel vast. So, go to mysteriousadventuretours.com and book your trip soon.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Yes.
All righty.
Yeah. We're back. Yes, it's hour number 2.
Back.
Yep. So here we go. So federal poisoning program, 1926. Now, mind you, there was a whole lot of stuff going on around that time. The reason why I highlight this is because this was the height of the money trust's ability to work in the darkness, in the shadows, because it was after this that there was a lot more scrutiny on them, primarily because of the works of people like Charles Lindbergh Sr. And a few others that really blew the whistle and did a lot of snooping, and they were just courageous. Let's just put it that way. It ruined their lives, by the way. Then in the 50s, you had Carol Reese, who wanted to get into how the endowments, the elite, were hijacking the education system. And so he commissions Norman Dodd to investigate that, called the Reese Committee, and the investigation into the endowments. And the Dodd Commission issued a report that's public. You can go download it off of Scribed, and I think it's even on archive.org. But they were blown away by what they found. Absolutely, that was happening. And it was happening and in cahoots with our own government. It was so bad that when he sent his assistant up to New York to look at the records of the meeting minutes of the endowments, it affected her so much that she had to be committed. She's an attorney. And she couldn't get over how much they had power over everybody, and where they were steering us to is crazy. And nothing ever came of that.
What is it called when private institutions and private corporations collude with the government? Wait, I think there's a term for that. You
mean fascism?
Yes, fascism. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
The whole fascist dictator thing. There's always a workaround, Scotty.
Right.
Right. So yeah. So in the 50s, you got the Dodd Commission. That happens. Swept under the rug. But and then Carol Reese ends up dying mysteriously. They say he was poisoned. So, I mean, you can't get over it. And I could go over many, many other ones, I just highlight these because they're the most well documented. So we're back in the 1920s and people are drinking, and it's at very large quantities. Alcoholism rates have soared during the 1920s. Insurance companies charted the increase at more than 300%. Speakeasies promotedly opened for business. They weren't even in the shadows. It was all out in the open. It didn't really matter. It's almost like the marijuana situation in this country now.
Right.
That concerns me, only because what you see during Prohibition with speakeasies and everything else is you have everybody does it, nobody talks about it, right? Kind of the way it is. That's the way marijuana is, and some of these places where it's more restrictive, but it's still illegal by federal standards. So there's that enforcement arm at any time. They can come and whack you.
And not only that, like in the states where it's illegal, such as my state, Kansas, we're still one of the most if you're caught with restrictive, and it's created this whole dangerous black market for quote unquote marijuana alternatives like Spice and K2, which make people literally go insane when they smoke it.
Workaround's always worse, man. I'm telling you.
Right.
Bad juju.
So they're creating an even more dangerous situation.
Thank you very much.
It's crazy, man.
When you try to tell somebody else what's best for them, it never goes over well if that other person doesn't have their respect. So you don't do that, and if you do, you don't tell them, hey man, I think maybe you should try this or something. That's about as far as it should go, because the doctor-patient relationship is sacred, and you don't get in the way of that. You just don't.
And whatever happened to dealing with people on an individual basis, right? Everybody's
exactly different. Accountability for each other, like for our own person.
If you
the gun manufacturer shouldn't be sued because somebody shoots somebody with a gun.
Right. Exactly.
It's a tool, right?
And just because
I don't.
just because some guy decides he wants to abuse something doesn't mean everybody should be punished for it. You know
Very
what I
good.
mean?
Yeah.
And that's where we're at right now. You
Yep.
have some bad apples that are abusing something, and everybody has to pay the price for it.
Because the government only has one tool in its toolbox, Scotty. And I
Right.
learned this, and it's a hammer. And they don't know any other way. They just don't. It's the same thing as the mob. If you don't pay them your tribute, dude, they're going to break your legs. That's all they know how to do. You know? So if you pay them your tribute, well, there's no problems. Everything's good. That's where we're at. It's a racket. It's not the rule of law. It's not Constitution. All that stuff is pie in the sky. You know? I can't stand those freaking country concerts where everybody's waving American flags and crap. I mean, I just can't. It makes me sick. Makes me sick. Freedom. Da, da, da. Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure.
Come on, Joe. This is America, land of the free, home of
Oh
the
my
brave.
gosh. You know, one of these days. All these things didn't derail people. They even stepped up enforcement.
Right.
They slowed back in the 20s, around 26, Canada got involved. And they started to put a stop to the alcohol going over the border. But the crime syndicates responded by stealing massive quantities of industrial alcohol used in paints and solvents and medical supplies. And then they redistilled it to make it potable. So they just ran it through the still, but it was 80% of the work was done. So, okay,
right.
Well, here's your workaround. Okay. So industrial alcohol is basically grain alcohol with some unpleasant chemicals mixed in to render it undrinkable. The U.S. government started requiring this denaturing process in 1906 for manufacturers who wanted to avoid the taxes that were levied on potable spirits. So the U.S. Treasury Department, charged with overseeing alcohol enforcement, estimated that by the mid-1920s, some 60 million gallons of industrial alcohol were stolen annually to supply the country's drinkers. So in response, in 1926, President Coolidge's government decided to turn to chemistry as an enforcement tool. Some 70 denaturing formulas existed by the 1920s. Most simply added poisonous methyl alcohol into the mix. Others used bitter tasting compounds that were less lethal, designed to make alcohol so awful that it became undrinkable. So to sell the stolen industrial alcohol, the liquor syndicates employed chemists to renature the products, returning them to a drinkable state. The bootleggers paid their chemists a lot more than the government did, and they excelled at their job. Stolen and redistilled alcohol became the primary source of liquor in the country. So federal officers ordered manufacturers to make their products far more deadly. So by 1927, about June, the new denaturing formulas included some notable poisons like kerosene and brucine, and that's a plant alkaloid closely related to strychnine, gasoline, benzene, cadmium, iodine, zinc, mercury salts, nicotine, ether, formaldehyde, chloroform, camphor, carbolic acid, quinine, and acetone. Now that's a drink right there, buddy.
That's a lovely mix
haymaker
right there.
Oh
right.
yeah, I just call that the haymaker. So the Treasury Department also demanded more methyl alcohol be added, up to 10% of the total product. So it was the new and improved industrial alcohol. So the results were immediate, starting with the horrific holiday body count in the closing days of 1926. Public health officials responded with shock. Quote, "The government knows it's not stopping drinking by putting poison in the alcohol. said Charles Norris. Yet it continues its poisoning processes, heedless of the fact that the people determined to drink are daily absorbing that poison. Knowing this to be true, the United States government must be charged with the moral responsibility for the deaths that poison liquor causes, although it cannot be held legally responsible. His department issued warnings to citizens detailing the dangers in whiskey circulating into the city. He said practically all the liquor that was sold in New York today is toxic. He publicized every day by alcohol poisoning. Assigned his toxologist Alexander Gettler to analyze confiscated whiskey for poisons. That long list of toxic materials, that's where that came from. Norris also condemned the federal program for its disproportionate effect on the country's poorest residents. Wealthy people, he pointed out, could afford the best whiskeys available. Most of those sickened and dying were those who couldn't afford expensive protection and dealt with the low-grade stuff. And the numbers were not trivial either. 1926 in New York City, 1,200 were sickened by poisonous alcohol, 400 died. The following year was 700. These numbers were repeated in the cities around the country as public health officials nationwide joined in the angry clamor. Furious anti-prohibition legislatures pushed for a halt in the use of these lethal chemistries. Quote, only one possessing the instincts of a wild beast would desire to kill or make blind the man who takes a drink of liquor, even if he purchased it from one violating the prohibition statutes, proclaimed Senator James Reed of Missouri. Officially, the special denaturing program ended only once the 18th Amendment was repealed in 1933. But the chemist war itself faded away.
Remember, collateral damage.
And that's exactly what the DEA calls people who suffer.
Right.
Your collateral damage. You know, and here's the issue. You're going to have people that are going to overdose. You're going to have people that are going to do that. That's the consequence of all the workarounds because of prohibition. Because now, whether it's the government turning their head and allowing this stuff to come over the border or be wherever it comes from, or it's actually coming from China and they have no way to stop it, which I don't know about you, but at least I remember ways that we could stop it when I was in the government, and
Right.
I don't think it's changed that much.
And it's obviously they're obviously turning a blind eye to it because they refuse to even like address it. Really, they act like it's not an issue.
They just ignore it.
You bring up that these dangerous drugs are coming across the southern border, and they just start screaming racist and blah blah blah, whatever at you, and they act like it's not even happening.
That's right.
And so
and of course you also have the new speaks coming, all of that stuff. You see the eugenics just happening right before your eyes, and you're like, holy moly. That's when I figured it out. I was like, whoa, man, this is the next step. This is what they're doing. And then you look over at China, right? Everything they're doing to the Uyghurs in China are exactly what the genocide that happened over in Nazi Germany and the concentration camps that did happen. I don't care who the hell anybody that's, oh, no, that didn't happen. Oh, it did happen. Now, you could dispute the 6 million number. Absolutely. I would dispute it all day long because of the 6 million from the 19th century on. Everything was 6 million. There was a story there. But the atrocities happened, most definitely, because the lessons learned from those atrocities are then being perpetrated on us. Oh, and then it's perfected. And then, that now you have AI into this whole thing. That's the other thing, too. That's going to be scary. So there was also another time where the government, couple times, where the government ran some pretty shady ass experiments on housing projects. I'm going to use one. This is the Matter of fact, let me share my screen here so everybody can see this, because this is important. So we're going to fast forward just past the end of World War II, right? Now we're in the 50s, pre the Great Society speech by Lyndon Johnson. But we have a experiment that's about to launch, and that's on the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects. And Gizmodo did this piece, but I would encourage anybody that hasn't seen the documentary Minds of Men, True Stream Media, to go check that out, because they get into this in some more detail, especially with the eugenics stuff. It's sick. And it says, did the Army's secret radiation experiments sabotage a housing project? Perhaps. So it says the true story of the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex may never be declassified fully. But what we do know is that it involves the unlucky architect of the World Trade Center, a lost stockpile of hundreds of thousands of baby teeth, and mountains of recently disclosed U.S. Army records that describe secret radiological experiments conducted on unsuspecting citizens in St. Louis, Minneapolis, and Winnipeg. And so what did they do? They built a housing complex, and they put these sprayers up on top, and they would also aerosol them from overhead. And they wanted to test the effects and see the rates of cancer, what it did for birth rates, all of that kind of stuff. They started to do that at the Pruitt-Igoe. It's terrible when you start thinking about it. It says here, residents in some areas of St. Louis noticed unusual activities in the days of nights through 1953 and 54. Large puffs of billowy powder were sprayed into the air by strangers and passing vehicles affixed to spraying device. The luminous powder lingered in the air below the slow-moving vehicles. Medical science of the 1950s was still pervaded by race premise that there were great differences between blacks and whites, including utterly wrong-headed notions like the assumption that black people did not experience pain as intensely as whites, or that they were immune from heat sickness and diseases like malaria. These preconceptions can be traced to the antebellum racial ideologies, collections, and pseudoscientific justifications that furnished a slave society with rationales for binding people of color to work in the fields. The perverse needs to legitimate slavery as the natural state of things produce reams of this racist sophistry, working backwards from preconceived bigotry. And so they use that, and that Pruitt-Igoe is central to that. And this is when they actually raised it. Thank God they did. But they would go in and they would run these experiments. They did sterilization. They did all sorts of stuff. It was terrible. So that's one. Then there's the Tuskegee experiments. And giving these poor men syphilis and then having them live it out and just let them freaking suffer and observe. They were experimented on. Herman Shaw, as you see here, was one of the survivors of the experiment. Oh, we're sorry. It's okay. I'm sorry. We didn't know. We were doing it for the common good, you see. Doing it for the common good. How about the thalidomide babies? People in the UK. You guys should know very well about that. I watched that series about the nurses, World War II, and post World War II into the 60s. The midwives, that's it. And that kind of opened my eyes to the effects of thalidomide, because they talked about that. Yeah. Call of the midwife. Yeah. So That was crazy. So it says here, in November 1961, I was 5 months old. This is BBC. What happened to thalidomide babies? My family had no idea why otherwise healthy baby boy had been born with short arms, twisted hands, and no thumbs. But by the end of the month, the truth was finally out in the open after a German newspaper reported that thalidomide was the likely cause for the mysterious spate of disabled babies born in Germany since 1958. The drug producer, Chemie Gruenthal, caved into growing pressure and on 26 November withdrew all products containing thalidomide from what had been very lucrative over-the-counter sales. And thalidomide had basically was a strong sedative property that many women took in the early weeks of pregnancies to ease morning sickness. So they'd be taking this stuff, but it was causing all sorts of birth defects and everything else. Terrible. Terrible. What happened to all these people? They had to suffer. They didn't get help. It was a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, so many people were affected by that. That's the kind of stuff that you have to understand as you go and you see this progression of history. But the theme and the song remain the same. You know, perpetrated by the same group or sect of people. It's really crazy. And where I find people most affected, the most affected people are the infirmed, the disabled, the helpless, the poor. The people that need the protection the most are the ones that get the least. And I mean, it's staggering. The discrimination is staggering. I can't even begin to tell you how disgusting it is to see people treated with such disrespect, disdain, almost disgust. And for what? You did nothing wrong, and you did nothing to deserve treatment that you're getting. So, there are places and organizations right now for pain sufferers that are like advocacy groups. Not enough. So that's one of the things that that my wife and I are going to be focusing on here in this year is to step up some sort of advocacy, but also I am going to try and find some sort of attorney that has standing to be able to let's sue the government for crimes against humanity, for war crimes, because what in and who the hell do these people think they are that they can treat people that way? Look, bad things are going to happen everywhere, every time. You can't avoid them. It's life. Anybody could end up, yeah. Anybody
and for people out there going, war crimes, that's kind of a strong term or whatever. You know what? The government itself has declared a war on drugs. So it is a war, right? And
it violates over half of the UN Human Rights Charter.
Right.
It violates over half of it. But then they speak out of the other side of their mouth and they say, well, by 2035, we're not going to have any opioids. Oh, sure we won't. Yeah. It's freaking ridiculous. I don't go ahead.
Wait till pharmaceutical companies just magically come up with some kind of opioid replacement of some sort. The
solution is never better than the original, as far as I'm concerned.
Right,
you know?
right. I know.
I'll
That's
take
what
the
I'm
one
saying.
that the Almighty. I'll take the one that the Almighty gave me. You know, really, just keep it natural. That's all you got to do. I don't need anything fancy, right? I don't think most people need anything fancy unless you're really effed up. And if you're really effed up, give them it. Why? They're freaking suffering and they can't function. What are they going to do? They're going to sit and rot and in pain? Why? What are they going to do? Oh, well, those people are going to sit in bed. No. Oh, maybe they'll get up. Maybe they'll feel better. Maybe they'll be more productive. Oh, I wonder, Scotty, as a percentage of loss, I wonder how much pain factors into loss of GDP.
Right. Because people who really need pain relief, they require that to actually function and to actually
but they can right?
To actually be a functional member of society, they need that pain relief. And when you deny them that pain relief, they can't function. So you would think, like you said, how much GDP is actually lost because somebody,
I would bet it's staggering,
can't get that pain relief and they're curled up in their bed suffering and
I'm going to tell you where it affects us most. I'm going to tell you where it affects us most, and we're seeing it in industry, and it's unbelievable. But in the trades are the people that work the hardest. They wear out the fastest, right? And there is a void of people and expertise in the trades, in mechanical, electrical, construction, carpentry, all that stuff. You can't find anybody. Masons, you can't find them.
Right.
And when you try, you can't.
My whole family is in the trades. My dad and my brothers all work in a metal fabrication shop. My dad's a welder. My brother's a sandblaster. My other brother's a welder. And my younger brothers. I mean, my youngest brother's 19 and he's already dealing with back issues and stuff like that just because of the hard amount of work that they have to do in there. My dad's in his late 50s. He's dealing with back issues and everything. I mean, it's such a he's been doing this for over like 35 years. I mean,
could you imagine the productivity? How many people would go back to work? How many people would pick it up? You want to kill inflation, man? Start putting people to work.
Yeah, and he's had to take off work, sometimes because his back is just killing him. And he's kind of like me. He's like, I'm not going to go down that route of trying to get pain meds because it just opens this Pandora's box of BS that you don't want to deal with, And so it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And and they're not the only ones. I mean, they work with people that dealing with pain, all that stuff. And like you said, it's in the trades. It's in these jobs, construction, all of that. Labor. It's
so Norway.
Yeah.
Norway went and. Norway and Portugal, I think Sweden, Switzerland. Those countries went to a different concept. Instead of using corporal punishment, they have decriminalized everything. And they took all the money that they were putting into enforcement and they put it into treatment and re-education. Not like re-education, like FEMA camp education, but kind of getting a trade, getting a path in life, starting down that swim lane. And wouldn't you know it, addiction rates have fallen by 50%. And that's why I want to bring this up. This is a very, very interesting thing. And this is why I want to talk about addiction. Because addiction is really a manifestation of, or let's just say, a glaring, flashing light that somebody's in some sort of pain and distress. If you're in that, that you're doing it for some reason. So Rat Park. So these psychoanalysts, they were thinking, Dr. Bruce Alexander, he says, I wonder if addiction has to do with the drug more than it does the person or the animal. So he says, we owe it to American psychologist, this is Psychiatric Times, to Dr. Bruce Alexander, the understanding that addiction is about far more than any drug, that a person or an animal in his studies in an active ingredient in their interaction with a drug to stand a chance beating the opioid and other drug epidemics, we will be far better equipped if we follow his lead. So this is the Psychiatric Times saying that. Now, this happened back in the 1970s that he did this. So now we're 40 years later, and we know this, but we're still taking this Gestapo hammer stance on all this. So his experiments were or have come to be called Rat Park. Researchers had already provided that when rats were placed in a cage all alone with no other community of rats and offered two bottles, one filled with water and the other with heroin or cocaine, the rats would repetitively drink the drug-laced bottles until they were all overdosed and died. Like pigeons pressing a pleasure lever, they were relentless until their bodies and brains were overcome and they died. But Alexander wondered. He said, is this about the drug or might it be related to the setting they were in? To test this hypothesis, he put the rats in rat parks where they were among others and free to roam and play and to socialize and to have sex. And they were given the same access to the same two types of drug-laced bottles. And when inhabiting a rat park, they remarkably preferred the plain water. Even when they did imbibe the drug-filled bottles, they did so intermittently, not obsessively, and they never overdosed. A social community beat the power of drugs.
Right, because
so he says, I believe the biggest... Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, their dopamine receptors were being stimulated by other things, right? By societal interaction, by being with other mice, by being able to procreate. That releases dopamine, releases pleasure receptors, right? And they did not require it. They didn't require the drug to do that for them. It was their environment that was providing the feeling of well-being and dopamine. So,
well, yeah, let me say this too.
Totally makes
Let me
sense.
say this too. They've measured this, right? They've measured the amount of people that are predisposed, a ratio. Okay.
Right.
The funny thing is, no matter what they do, the ratio stays constant. It doesn't alter itself. It stays steady relative to population. It doesn't really waver too much. They can't win because you can't beat free will. You're not going to do it. You'll never do it. So anyway, I found that extremely interesting that we have all the science, all the metrics to tell us what works, what doesn't. And we do the total opposite. We do the total opposite, like every time. And we make it worse and worse and worse. But in the name of your own good. It's for your own good, Scotty. That's what it's all about, my friend.
And a high percentage of people who suffer with addiction issues also are people who tend to have very little social contact with others, quote unquote loners, if you will, that tend to either be alone, either unwittingly or whatever. And so I think that plays into the whole rat park experiment because you're dealing with people that, for whatever reason, are looking for some kind of a pleasure or dopamine stimulation that they're not getting otherwise, socially. And so they're choosing the drug to fill that void. And that's really what addiction is you're trying to fill a void.
Yeah, you're filling a hole.
You're filling a hole, And,
yep.
Yeah.
So, there have been people that have that stood up to it, but
right.
They normally get snuffed out. A lady by the name of Saban Reynolds was one of the last really big heavy hitter advocates that she ran this pain relief network. And it was by far and away making the most inroads for palliative care. Her background was her husband was a chronic pain sufferer and he couldn't get treatment. He ended up blowing his brains out. And it affected her so that, she fought hot and heavy. So she remarried a lawyer, and it was also a pilot. So they flew to Washington to actually testify before Congress and everything. It's really amazing. And of course, it was the single engine Cessna crash that had to take her out because she was making too much progress.
Go figure.
Yeah, that's the one thing too. For all you people out there that ever do anything that catches lightning in a bottle, do anything like that, and you start making change, and remember, the powers that shouldn't be don't like change, not change that they don't like. Don't get in a single engine plane. Never get in a single engine plane.
Or a helicopter. Or, yeah.
So she dies. Her husband dies and effectively neuters the pain relief network. The government comes in right after that and seizes all the assets of the pain relief network once she died. I mean, how crazy is that? And ever since then, you have your localized advocacy groups, but yeah, there's no power. No power. I want to say USPainFoundation.org. I think they were the ones that one of the ladies that started it went down to D.C. and testified before Congress on a stretcher. But I mean, and that's great. But as long as we allow these injustices to go on, because we're not asserting our rights, it's just going to get worse and worse. So what our goal is, we like I said, we want to be able to take this to court, have standing where we discuss the merits of the Controlled Substances Act and other things that have been used to the war crimes being committed, all in the name of peace and safety, all in the name of your well-being, and all these crimes against humanity that have happened as a result, the human trafficking, all of it. And got to discuss that in front of a jury and a judge, and get the doctors and the patients to be able to get together without fear of government intrusion. They got to get out. They got to get out. So that's the overarching goal, is to restore the doctor's dignity, to restore the patient's. Imagine you go to 8 years of med school, and this pharmacist is telling you, I can't fill that. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. This guy that just went to 3 weeks of training at Walgreens University just told you to go F yourself.
Ridiculous.
And hey, I'm just saying, a doctor's got to be a little bit twisted too about this. It's a teenager, a snot-nosed, pimple-faced teenager. No, I'm not going to do that. No. Yeah, the DEA agent. How many doctors are there that are in the DEA? Out of all those agents, who's the doctor? Who knows more than the doctor? It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So we got to restore a little common sense, and that really what it is. It is racketeering, and that if anybody, if you guys want a good history read for the week, just download it. It's free. War is a Racket. Smedley Butler, 90 pages. It is not a hard read. He wasn't exactly a Rhodes Scholar, if you will, but man, was he an ass kicker. And he was an ass kicker in the sense that he didn't play ball with the powerful. Matter of fact, he openly loathed them for the places that they sent him and the things that he had to do to protect private industry and things like Standard Oil and Chiquita and stuff like that.
I was gonna say, wasn't he? They sent him to prop up these banana republics and stuff.
Yep.
Down in South
they
America,
did all that too.
Central
The little
America.
secret
Yep.
operations. Yep.
Right.
So that is the kind of thing that we're witnessing now. Only it's happening to people that are crippled, that are disabled. As the eugenics board said, some people are born to be a burden on the rest. Yeah. That's the way that a lot of us are viewed. Useless eaters. You'll hear that as a term. You'll see how words are twisted as time goes on. We're seeing that happen now. A lot of people don't realize that there was an act, Smith-Mundt Act, that was repealed about almost 10 years ago that banned propaganda from happening here in the United States, that banned the collusion of government and private entities like Twitter and the government and Twitter and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Twitter and all the social media. And when that law was repealed, it basically made it open season for them to be able to manipulate the masses. But it happens. It happens. And it's happening more now than ever before. And oftentimes they do it through subtle changes in language. And
Right.
you see when they come into play.
And look at the term consumer. I mean, that's a derogatory term.
That's a great example.
When you're referred to as a consumer, you're referred to, it's basically like you're a bottom feeder. That's
You're like
just,
a Hoover vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, you're just consuming, and it's not.
You're like that guy on
not
Monty Python that blows up after he eats so
Right.
much, right?
Right.
Oh no, that's at the end of the universe. I'm sorry, maybe it's that. I can't remember which one it is.
It's not a positive term by any stretch of the imagination, but people have just become so accustomed to being called consumers that there's, hey, consumers are, going out there and doing the annual run of a sheeple every Black Friday, the consumer.
Oh my God. Do you see that though? But that's all training. That's all training.
Right.
Black Friday wasn't a thing when I grew up. There was no Black Friday. When I grew up, there was no Black Friday by cracky. And it's because there wasn't. It was introduced, and slowly but surely it became worse and worse and worse until people started killing each other for a Sunbeam toaster.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy,
Yeah.
dude. So you can see the social engineering that happens, but now we can do it in real time because now we have social media, and now everybody's they're on it all the time in their life, and this and that, and boom, and it's gone crazy. It's all about control. That's what this is all about, and the fact is, if that's the way they want it, then you have to either do a takeover of the government or you have to change the Constitution. Otherwise, you can't do this stuff. It's just not legal. It's not lawful. It's not anything. It's cruel. It's freaking torture. It's suffering that doesn't need to happen. And why would we want to have people suffer needlessly? And there are times when you have to, I guess, but It's terrible.
When you have a population that's suffering, and you have a population that can barely function, you have a population that doesn't really have much of an opportunity to, fight back or do anything.
That's right.
It's a form of control.
Well,
it's a form.
Let's take a look at.
Yeah.
Take a look at Japan. Look at Japan right now. So Japan is an interesting case study because Japan has an aging population. They have an aging problem.
Right. They have a whole sort of population replacement problem is
Yep. So
happening.
here's the deal there, right? Because we can kind of take a look at how some of these policies have played out and what the end result is. And we're seeing it now play out in Japan. They're a little ahead of the ball game here. So Japan is now redistributing people to different areas to procreate because villages and towns and cities and prefectures and all that stuff, they're all they're not replacing people fast enough, and now the economies are collapsing. So they're trying to redistribute people throughout the island and make it so that the population or the centers of people can support themselves. And that's going to happen here, but it'll be worse because we're already seeing an absolute void. When I tell you, you have very little experienced maintenance mechanics, electricians. You ask anybody around, you can't find them. Everybody's looking for them and you can't get enough. And the ones that are out there that are coming out, they can't come fast enough, but most of them aren't. It's like there was something lost in translation. And really that was a push for 4-year universities. A lot of people did that. Went the route of 4-year university. So you got a ton of engineers, but you can't fix anything. And that's the conundrum we're in, and we're not going to be able to catch up. So
Right.
That's why the labor market's all screwed up. And then there's all sorts of other things that are happening too, and this culmination or this coming together of all these crises is gonna be pretty interesting to watch this year in 2023, Scotty.
Yeah, I was about to say, not only are we dealing with the issue of people in pain, not being able to get any kind of relief, then you stack on top of that the economic issues.
Oh, speaking of that, I do want to tip of the cap to Kanadistan for putting a 2-year moratorium on people that don't live in Canada can't buy property. So they had the same problem going on that we do, where investment companies and foreigners were scooping up all the property, and there wasn't enough housing for everybody, for their own people. We're seeing it here. That's why rent and property has exploded in the United States. So Canada just put a 2-year moratorium on that. Said, hey, if you're not a family, no bueno.
Okay,
Can't buy a house for 2 years. If
I
they
can't-
did that
I
here,
can't-
that would help out a lot.
Yeah, I can't give Canada credit for very many things, but hey,
No,
thumbs
me
up
neither.
for that. Right,
Yeah.
so
Because
okay, cool.
they got to stand up to places like BlackRock. Now, funny enough, BlackRock's starting to feel the pinch because they went all in and scooped up a lot. They are probably one of the biggest contributors to the housing crisis we have, and now they got a kind of run on them, and they don't have any liquidity because they threw it all into the housing. So who knows what's going to happen in 2023? But I can tell you this: it's going to be a fight because we ain't going to be treated like this anymore. Nope. So the Freedom Link is going to be going on the offensive. And the last time we did this, it got kind of hairy, but things were okay. And the thing that was good about that was we found out that billions of rounds of ammunition were being bought by the DHS for no freaking reason whatsoever, and the no hesitation targets, and all of the web sleuths that learned how to use Fed BizOps. Those guys, all of those people contributed in ways that made it very, very difficult for them to be able to hide in, out in the open. Yeah, it was something else. So that, and of course the PTSD associated with it afterwards. So it's been kind of a slog since then. However, it's time to kind of do this again and make it make some change and be the change that we need to be for those that can't do it themselves. And that's what it's all about, because we really have an epidemic in this country, and it's needless. And the suffering is, I wonder, anybody that's like an empath out there, you got to be like going nuts. It's got to be like sticking your finger in an electric socket. Because I mean, I don't get it, with the inflation and the devaluation of currencies and the cost of living crisis.
They're gonna feel like Princess Leia when her homeworld was destroyed. She felt the screams of a million people or something.
Yeah, man. Holy schmoly, it's got to be terrible. That's why, I wonder if we don't, like in the spirit world, shine out like a freaking lighthouse in the vast, where, in the interdimensional realm. I just don't get it. And we just make it worse every time. Every time we make it worse and worse and worse and worse. It's like as technology advances, we have more problems, not less. And I often wonder if it's because what's been seen can't be unseen. So it's like you have to make a law to stop it now. And we've got this habit that's happened. And now we've got laws that are like this deep.
Maybe we need to ask the omniscient Chat GPT what to do, and it'll let us know how to solve all these problems.
I was actually pondering that. I was like, okay, there was a matter of fact, because we only got a few minutes. There's a app now where you can have AI defend you in court for traffic tickets. I actually downloaded it just to look at it. Wow. And you pay like a subscription service to it, but it will tell you everything you need to do and say. And you just have to have your phone there, and it watches and listens and then tells you what to say and how to say it. And I guess it has a pretty good success rate. So now they're putting it into service.
Yeah, I'm sure that thing has been trained on many pages of legal. But
herein lies the issue, right? Herein lies the issue, and it's a slippery slope, because again, AI is a tool, and it comes in many shapes and forms. But after seeing what ChatGPT can do, general intelligence is looking more and more possible and realistic, and more sooner rather than later. And that's what scares me, is the general intelligence. When it gets to that point, oh man, dude. I mean, what's going to be done in the name of advancing humanity, or evolving?
Wait till prosecutors start using it to try to nail you.
It's fair and just because it's a computer and it doesn't
for the bag of weed they pulled you over with.
I know, right. It's a slippery slope. And how many jobs stand to get lost as a result of something like that can work so fast and so efficiently. Yeah. Crazy, man. Crazy. All right. Well, that is it, my friends. We're done. It's been fun. But now me and Scotty, we got to run.